Hey, what is going on guys? Welcome back to another PS4 Jailbreak tutorial. So in this one, we're covering all things with remote play. I'm going to show you how to get remote play set up on the jailbreak and any previous jailbreaks, of course. And I'll also show you guys how to get it working over the internet, not just the internal network, so you can access your PS4 from outside your normal network when you're out and about, from your phone or your Switch or any other device that you want to use here. We'll show the official client from Sony as well as the open source version so that you can get all the different versions working on your 11.0 PS4, and there'll be timestamps linked down there in the video description. So let's go ahead and get into this here. So to start with, you want to make sure that you're currently running the jailbreak and you've got Gold 10 running, and then we're also going to get connected up to our network. So make sure you are connected to the internet and you've got a valid IP address. If you go to system information, you can see mine is 192.168.1.173. So I am connected back up to the network. So from here, we're going to run the Apollo save tool, which you can download from the Homebrew store. If you don't already have it installed, I showed you how to install the Homebrew store in the first video in the playlist, which shows you how to get the jailbreak up and running from scratch. So I'll leave that linked below. So then we're going to head over to the user tools section, and we're going to activate PS4 accounts, and we're going to offline activate our account. So you only want to do this on an account that has all zeros currently as the ID, as you can see there in brackets. Only do this to an account that has all zeros on it. So if you already have an account activated, just make a new local account and then activate that one. But as you can see, this one is not currently activated, so we're going to press X to activate it. Now, if you're only going to use the open source remote play client, you can use any account ID in here and it will work. However, if you want to be able to use the official remote play client from Sony, then you will need to actually use a account ID that matches a real PlayStation 4 account. So if we switch over to the computer, there's a few things you're going to need to download. If you want to use the official client from Sony, you can download it here. Go to Control Your PS4 Console and then select the one that matches your device and download and install it. So we also have the open source client, which you can download here. If you just head to the references, you can then click 2.2.0 or the latest version here, and you have all the different versions: Android, Nintendo Switch, Windows, Mac OS, all available here. So I would just download the x86_64 zip for Windows. Now, even if you're not going to be using the open source client, there is a file that you're going to want to grab from here. So if we go into the browse section, we're going to go down to the scripts folder, select that. And then there is a PSN account ID script. There's the Go version and there's the Python version. I'm going to use the Python version, so I'm going to select that one here and then go to the View Raw option to view the raw file. And then we can just right click in this page and go to Save As. And you can just save it to your desktop as a Python file or all files as PSN account ID.py, and then click Save and save it to your desktop. Okay, so once we have all of that stuff downloaded, you can see we have it right here. So we want to grab our PSN account ID. Now, the way that we can do this is we can use this Python script. So you need to have Python installed. You can download it from the Microsoft Store. Just grab it right here, search for Python, install version 3.11. And then we're just going to right click in the same folder as our script here and open in terminal. Select that option. And then we're going to type in Python and then the name of the script, which is just Python-account-id.py. We'll paste it in there and then just press enter. That will run the script. Now, it may say that no module named requests exists. Just type in Y for yes and it should download the required module. And then here we go. So open the following URL in your browser. So if you hold down the control key on your keyboard and then click the link here, that will open it up. And that will take you to PlayStation Sign In. So just sign into your PlayStation account here. Once you sign in, you should get taken to this page where it just says redirect. Once you get to this page, you want to copy the link up here in your clipboard. So copy that to your clipboard and paste that link back into the script and press enter. And then this will give you all of your account information here. So you can see here, all of the information is included, including the account ID. So this is the base 64 version of your account ID. We also want the user ID in here as well. So highlight it and then right click to copy it. And then we're going to head to this website, which will be linked in the description, to convert it to a hexadecimal number. So we're going to paste in the number up here, convert, and this will convert it to a hex number, hex value. So we just want to enter this here on our PS4. This is our account ID right here. So if I go back to my PS4, I can now use this ID and enter it in here. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in to my account ID and then click done. And then that will activate the account using my real PSN account ID. So from there, we can close out of the Apollo Save tool and restart our PS4. So from here, we can go into our settings, we can scroll down and we can head to our remote play connection settings. And then from here, you want to make sure, of course, that enable remote play is selected. And then we can add device, which will give us our code. So if we switch back over to the computer, we're going to give the official app from Sony a try first of all. So we're going to open up the remote play client, sign in to PSN, sign in using the same account that we signed in on when we were grabbing the account ID. Okay, so we've just signed in. That should be good there. I guess we'll confirm and continue. We'll select PS4. It's going to try and search for it. Now, it might find it successfully. If not, you can just click link manually. And that'll give you the number that you can enter. So if we go back to the PS4 here, you can see we've got the ID. And we just want to enter that ID in the remote play client. So 7078 and then 4623. We'll click link. And there we go, linking your PS4. Modded Warfare connected using remote play. And there it is. We have remote play up and running here on our PS4. Sound is coming through fine. I can use my keyboard to control the console remotely. And there we go. We have remote play up and running using the official PlayStation Remote Play app on our 11.0 jailbreak. So that's how you get that up and running. Pretty straightforward. So of course, we can also try the open source client. Give this one a shot. So if we enable the Wi-Fi, it should just scan and find the PS4. It's detected here on the network. If it's not detected automatically, you can just click the plus button, type in the IP address, which was 192.168.1.173. And then from there, we can just click save. And then you can double click. And you want to enter PS4 firmware above or equal to 8.00. So the account ID, base64, is going to be this account ID that we got from the script where it said, this is your account ID. You can just copy it and paste it in here. And then the PIN number, of course. So we'll need to head back to our PS4 again. So that's going to be 10524598. Register. And there we go. Successfully registered. We can double click it. And we now have this remote play client working as well. So there is a crackling sound with this open source client that you might be able to hear. There's a couple of fixes I found online for this. One of them that works well for me. So if you are running into that audio issue with the crackling sound, what you can do to fix that is if you head into the settings icon here, you can do a couple of things. We should really have the codec on H.264 since we're not on a PS5. Also, the audio buffer size, you can try increasing this. Default is 9600. You can try increasing this to a higher number, which might get rid of that crackling sound. That did not fix it for me. What fixed it for me was heading into this folder for the open source client, heading to the audio folder and deleting this Windows DLL file that's in here. You basically need to get rid of that. So it's being used right now. So I'll have to close the program and then delete it. And then once it's deleted, we can then run the open source client again here. And with that now running, we can give this another try and see if that fixes the issue. So now there's no audio. Oh no, we do have audio, it's just delayed. So it's a bit delayed. So to reduce the delay, you can reduce the buffer size. So if you reduce it down to about 4000, it shouldn't be too bad of a delay. So we'll set it to 4000. And now that should hopefully be fixed. Let's give this another try. Yep. So no more crackling audio. So that's how you get that fixed there in the open source client. Now, a couple of other things to mention, of course, if to jailbreak the PS4 on 11.0, you have to use the Ethernet cable with PPPoE. Now, there are some solutions like the Raspberry Pi solution that can give you internet access once it successfully jailbroke the console through the Ethernet port. But if you're using a separate internet connection like Wi-Fi, once you've successfully ran the jailbreak, then you're not really going to be able to remote play when you're running the jailbreak. So therefore, you're going to want to have the console already jailbroken before you're wanting to use remote play, and then just put the console into rest mode and recover from rest mode whenever you want to access remote play on your PS4, instead of turning the console off. So you can do that by going into your Gold Hen settings, and then going to the settings option and making sure enable rest mode support is ticked. And then on this open source remote play client, when you go to close it, it should be set here to ask you if you want to put the console into sleep mode or not. So that way, when you're done using remote play and you want your console to power down, you can just say yes and it will put it into rest mode, and then it basically sends a wake up packet to the console whenever you want to connect again with remote play, and that should allow it to recover from rest mode with the jailbreak still running so you can continue using it. And then of course, if you just want to disconnect temporarily and connect again, you don't have to put it into rest mode. You can just say no, and you should be good to just reopen it again and regain access. So I could end the video here. However, let's take things one step further. What if you want to be able to access remote play over the internet, not just on the local network? So if you're out somewhere and you want to be able to access your local network and access your PS4 when you're not at home, you're not within your local network, how do we do that? Now, you can access it from the outside by setting up like a VPN on your router, and then having, any device that wants to access remote play when you're not at home can access that VPN and then access the PS4 that way. That's one way to do it, although not all routers support VPNs, of course. So the other way is just to open the ports on your router and access it via the public IP address. So I'll show you guys how to do that real quick. So first of all, to access it over the internet, we're going to need to grab our public IP address. So if I go to the website whatismyipaddress.com, this will give you your public IP address. So for all the people who have always said you leaked your IP address in previous videos where I was just showing a local IP address, you actually have a point for once. So yeah, anyway, if we go ahead and copy our public IP address here, what we're going to do is then log into our router. Now, port forwarding is different depending on what router you have. All makes and models of routers set up their port forwarding slightly differently. So you can use a website like portforward.com. I'll leave this resource down in the video description. You can go to routers and then list of routers. This will give you a big list of different brands of routers that are available and different models. You can select a model that you have and then try and find it in here. Maybe your exact version doesn't exist, but there might be a similar router version here that you can select. And then it gives you a detailed breakdown on how to log into your router, what the default gateway address is most likely to be, and then exactly how you can figure out how to actually port forward, what settings on the router you need to go into in order to port forward for your specific router. So I'll leave that down in the video description. In my case, I need to go to 192.168.1.1, which is the default gateway of my router, and that will take me over here. I don't know why it's zoomed in so much. There we go. So log into your router. And then for me, I need to head down to the WAN section on this ASUS router. And then I'm going to head to virtual server / port forwarding. And then from here, I can add a profile. And the service name is going to be PS4 Remote Play. And protocol. So the ports that you want to open, it's going to be 9295 for TCP, and then 9296 and 9297 for UDP. So if your router supports opening ports for both TCP and UDP, I would just select both, and then you can just do 9295 to 9297. So that's a port range between 9295 and 9297. And then for the internal IP address, that's going to be the IP address of my PS4, which is 1.173. And that is essentially how you get that set up. We can click OK. Then I can turn on port forwarding. So let's give this a try. If we go back onto our open source client here, we can add a new host, and I'm going to paste in the public IP address. So this is over the internet, not on my local network this time. So we'll add that. We'll double click. We'll do the same thing where we're going to first of all add our ID, our account ID entered in here, and then the PIN number. We're going to add our device here. So 8404 and then 3954. So we'll register, And there we go, registered successfully. So the ports have been successfully opened because that is accessing it over the internet, because I'm using the public IP address. So it would not normally work if the ports were closed. So let's try and double click on this. It might be a bit laggier because it is over the internet, but nope, it's actually responding quite well. So looks like we're all good there. Okay, so now we can access it over the internet, but there's still two potential problems, which is that this might only be temporary, because if you don't have a static IP address for your public IP, then it's going to change in a few days, and then you're not going to be able to access your PS4 remotely from outside your network. And then also, if you're using a dynamic IP address for the local IP of the PS4 as well, then the port forwarding is also going to break when the IP address changes on your PS4. So those are two problems. So let me just quickly go over how we can address both of those issues. So for example, on my router, I can pretty easily just go into the LAN section on my router. And then if I go to the DHCP server, there is an option here for me to manually assign IP addresses around the DHCP list, which should allow me to basically assign my PS4 a static IP address. You can do this on the PS4 itself, just set up a static IP address and make sure it's one that, you know, the router is not using for any other devices. I can do it on my router so that it will always assign my PS4 the same IP. So with this, I can just say, hey, take my PS4. So this is the MAC address of my PS4, I guess. Take that PS4 and then assign it this IP address, 1.173, and make sure that it always assigns that IP address. So that way, my PS4 is never going to change to another IP address. So the ports will always be forwarded for my PS4 for remote play. So that is one fix right there for the LAN IP address changing. Okay, so the final issue is if you have a dynamic address for your public IP address. So your public IP address changes every so often, which mine does. Otherwise, I wouldn't be willing to show you the public IP address right here. I would obviously not be showing you that if it wasn't dynamic. So if you do have a public IP address that changes, then, you know, that's a problem, because what's going to happen when the IP address changes and you still have the old IP address saved in your remote play settings, you'll have to update it every single time. It's not ideal. So the way around that is you can call your internet service provider and ask them to give you a static IP address instead. That's an option, but sometimes they charge you extra for that. So what you can do instead is use a dynamic DNS service. So in my case, my router actually supports this built in. So it's got DDNS, which is dynamic DNS. So I can select this option. I can enable it. I've already got it entered here. So PS4 Remote Play.asuscom.com. And I can set this for no certificate. And I can just click apply. So this will give me a host name, which is going to be ps4rp.asuscom.com. And then the route, every time my IP address changes, it will update that host name with the new IP address every single time automatically for me. So that way, if my IP address changes, it's no problem. I can just use this host name instead of the IP address to access remote play. So just to show what that looks like, if we try and access remote play with this, we'll click plus, we'll add it as our ps4rp.asuscom.com. And then we'll enter our device ID again, register, and there we go. You can see it worked. So it's now using the asuscom.com address instead of the public IP address. And so every time the IP address changes, my router will update the DNS with the new IP address so that I will always be able to access it using this ps4rp.asuscom.com. I'll always be able to access it that way. So that is essentially how you can kind of solve that problem. Now, what if your router doesn't have a dynamic DNS option built in, which a lot of routers are not going to have? Well, you can use a free service like DuckDNS to do this for you. So essentially, DuckDNS, free dynamic DNS hosted on AWS. You can set this up. You can basically sign in with your Google account, enter your public IP address, and enter a domain name that you want to use. And then it will be something at duckdns.org. And you can have like ps4rp.duckdns.org, and then that will be the address. And then in order to update the public IP address every time it changes, if you go to the install option, there's lots of different things. So you can find any device on your network that you run 24/7. You can basically run a script that will update the IP address on the DNS every time it changes. So there's one for Linux, and there's one for Windows GUI, there's a Mac OS version, there's a version for OpenWRT routers, Fritzbox routers, DDWRT routers, Technicolor, pfSense, FreeNAS, and all of that stuff. So if you have any of those devices, or any device that runs Linux, for example, that you just run 24/7, a home server, a NAS, anything that you're running on your network constantly, you can use that to update the DNS with the new IP address every time it changes. And then you can have your, PS4 Remote Play.duckdns.com that you can use to access Remote Play over the internet. So yeah, anyway, that's basically it. That is how you can get the Remote Play set up on your local network, as well as a good solution for accessing it over the internet. And I know the quality doesn't look great on here right now, but you can of course edit that. You can increase the bit rate. I've just got it set to the automatic setting. You can change it from 60 FPS to 30. You can also up the resolution to 1080p if you have a PS4 Pro. If you have a regular PS4, I think it's limited to 720. But there you go, that's better. Nice and sharp now. So anyway, that's it for this video. I know it was maybe a little bit complicated and a little long. So I'm curious whether you guys kind of appreciate that, or if you'd rather I do a kind of more simplistic guide that just shows the very basics, which would just be a quick, because you can get Remote Play up and running in 5 minutes. But, if you want to go the extra mile, get it working over the internet and deal with issues like having a dynamic IP address, then, obviously it takes a little bit longer to cover all of that stuff. But yeah, let me know what you think. So hope you guys enjoyed this one or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys once again in the next video.